This is A to Z with Mark Zinno, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, and it starts now.
Good afternoon. Welcome to A to Z here on Locked On Sports Atlanta, where today I tell you it's a tough test with an easy answer. Welcome in. We are live here on this Football Friday from parts unknown. As yes, I am down at Fort Stewart doing some military training on this Friday, but have time to knock out A to Z right here on Locked On Sports Atlanta, free on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. Search Locked On Sports Atlanta, also on Roku TV. Wherever you get Roku TV on that Amazon Fire Stick, download the Roku app, check out A to Z and all the great shows on Locked On Sports Atlanta. Give us a follow on Twitter at Locked On ETL. Of course, I'm at Mark Zinno, MarkZinno. We've got a lot of Falcons news and notes to get to prior to their game with Cincinnati coming up on Sunday. A blockbuster trade in the NFL, and we will do our picks for this Football Friday coming up into the weekend. So let's get right to it here on a Friday edition of A to Z. It's interesting as the Falcons get set to take on the Cincinnati Bengals. Couple of things I came across here. A couple of times this year, we thought the Falcons were going to have their toughest test, right? Like we felt like the Falcons were going to face a really, really tough opponent, particularly on the defensive side of the ball. And, they weren't really necessarily going to have a bunch of answers for them. Well, I think it's safe to say through the first now, what is coming up on week 7 in the NFL, this is the toughest team defensively that they've faced, right? We know the Saints or at least were earlier this year, a little bit more of a challenge offensively, but they've had some injuries. The Rams, clearly their offense isn't what we thought it was going to be, despite the fact that they jumped out to a 28-3 lead against the Falcons. Even the Buccaneers, to a certain extent, 2 weeks ago, a very banged-up team, didn't really have all of their weapons, all their complement, including their offensive line. And that's not taking anything away from the Falcons. That's all to say that this Cincinnati team coming up here on Sunday is the toughest test that Dean Pease and this defense are going to get by far. We've got a bigger sample size. We kind of know what they are. They seem to have turned a corner last week, and they got their offense in a good position. So now, obviously, it's Joe Burrow, it's Jamar Chase, it's T. Higgins, it's Joe Mixon. There's a lot of challenges here for this defense. And I thought, even last week, I thought that against the 49ers, this defense was really going to be pushed and challenged from a scheme standpoint and a coaching standpoint. The 49ers didn't have it. Obviously, very banged up, a lot of injuries on the team still, and they're not 100%. Most of those injuries are on the defensive side of the ball, so you give the Falcons a little bit of credit for being able to handle things offensively. But how are they going to slow down Jamar Chase? And, oh, by the way, he didn't practice yesterday with a hip injury. I don't think there's anything to make of that. We'll see. We'll see what the practice schedule looks like later on today when they list who's there at practice and what's not, but just something to note. And some of us are sort of hoping for a rematch between Jamar Chase and AJ Terrell. Yeah, remember that national title game where Jamar Chase for LSU played AJ Terrell for Clemson, and Jamar Chase went freaking wild in the national championship game? I remember after the Falcons drafted Terrell, I'm like, yo, that's the dude that cost me money in the national championship game because Jamar Chase kept flying right by him. I kid, but no, seriously. Anyway, so that was something that we're all looking forward to. But AJ Terrell has a hip injury, and his status for Sunday is up in the air at this point in time, at least according to the latest from D. Orlando Ledbetter, the AJC. So we'll have to wait and see. And I'm just kind of looking at his latest column here and what he said. But yeah, that it's a thigh injury. Sorry, he's recovering from a thigh injury, not a hip injury. And so we hope that Terrell's able to go. But here's the thing, and this is the interesting thing about Sunday that I think is really worthwhile noting here. If this is a tough test, I think the answer is simple, and that's try to match Cincinnati offensively and make it a game where sort of the last team to have the ball wins, right? Because the one thing the Falcons have a clear, distinct advantage on is head coach. Clearly have a clear, distinct advantage at head coach. It's not even close. Some of you still think Zach Taylor is a good coach. I've been telling you guys for a while, he's not. He's awful. They got to the Super Bowl last year in spite of him, not because of him. Really, they did. Go back and watch the tape. especially in a game where they got sacked 9 times and their field goal kicker missed 2 field goals or 1 field goal because Tennessee Titans kicker missed 2. So, yeah, they did not belong in the Super Bowl last year. I call it a little bit lucky. I don't want to take anything away from a good team, very talented, obviously, but they did not belong in the Super Bowl last year. So, all that said, Falcons have a huge distinct advantage in coaching. And I came across something on Twitter last night that highlighted it, but also brought forth a little bit of a problem that we all know is there, but we've hushed over the last couple of weeks. So there is a guy on Twitter who tweets at looks like underscore underscore the king underscore underscore. Don't know his name. It's just what his Twitter handle is. And somebody who I follow retweeted something that he wrote, and I had a response to it. I'll get to that in a minute. But the genesis of what he wrote was about a book and a column by Tyler Dunn of Sports Illustrated. Tyler Dunn has been a fantastic football writer for a really long time. And his tweet was no player forced the position and the sport to evolve quite like Tony Gonzalez. Get the blood and guts for his full remarkable rise. And they put an excerpt from the chapter of the book on SI.com. And the guy who tweets at underscore underscore the king underscore underscore, I'm just going to call him the king from now on, says, wow, I love this article. Malarkey was one smug a-hole, and I'm on Tony's side here. I hate coaches like this. That's why the league left him behind. Of course, the Falcons rehired this idiot before he retired. LOL. True statement. But this is why Atlanta has been bad for so long. Just refuse to get quality coaches. We finally have that in Atlanta, and you're seeing it real time. Yes, Pitts and London aren't putting up numbers. Blame this QB. He's winning in spite of it. If Malarkey and Cutter were still here in Atlanta, we'd be 1-5, just like we were when they were here. Guys like Malarkey are why I'm confident in Smith. Malarkey and Cutter were archaic. They just couldn't adjust. They only knew what they knew. Smith, in the span of 23 games, has dusted off so much and produced with one hand behind his back. Also, Tony G blocked as a tight end, just like Kyle Pitts. So being mad at Smith for making Pitts a good blocker is stupid. It's the position, but at least he isn't being stubborn like Malarkey. 100% true on all those things, especially on Malarkey and Cutter. Cutter was an abomination of a coach by the time Dan Quinn had got him. And it was a terrible, terrible hire to make him the OC. Neither here nor there. That's the past. But it was the last tweet that really got me about Tony G being a good blocker as a tight end. So is Pitts. Being mad at Smith for making Pitts a good blocker is stupid. Well, I responded to him, and we went back and forth for a little bit. But I said, look, this is all true, but the thing is, you don't draft a guy 4th overall to be a good blocker unless he's a left tackle. You have to be real about this. There's a certain part of the offensive production that has to happen for Pitts. Travis Kelce is a good blocker. Rob Gronkowski was a good blocker. George Kittle is a great blocker. Those guys still, when healthy, catch 100 balls and have offensive production. It is possible to do both. And while I'm not going to sit here and start making a big deal of, the fact that Kyle Pitts isn't being targeted or isn't catching balls, because I do understand it is the quarterback. I 100% agree. That's the problem. You have to get a quarterback who can make both happen. They don't have that right now. But the way to get out of Sunday being a problem is to get Pitts the ball, because nobody on that defense can cover him. You got to choose one over the other. And in certain games, one will dictate more than the other. And in this case, I think the game dictates that you use Pitts more as a weapon than a blocker. And I'm curious to see if Arthur Smith will do that on Sunday. It's going to be very, very interesting. All right, I want to get to a blockbuster trade in the NFL that happened last night and how it affects the Falcons and where should their mindset be. But first, a word from our friends at betonline.net. Fastest and easiest way to check in on all your betting needs. Find your favorite sports and events at the #1 online source for odds, lines, and games. Again, Falcons getting 6.5. And this line opened up at 6. Falcons now getting 6.5 from the Cincinnati Bengals, which is very interesting to see because this is a Falcons team that's 6-0 against the spread. You can get news like that and reviews of every league, including Major League Baseball, college football, NBA, NHL, obviously the NFL, combat sports, esports, even golf. It's all right there. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all your sports wagering information, from live in-game betting, scores, and podcasts. I love listening to the podcast whenever I'm, on the treadmill or whatever, or, working out. I get a quick chance to hear all the other betting information that I need to know. You can get it at betonline.com or use your mobile device to learn more about the action happening today. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, so late last night, we see the blockbuster news that Christian McCaffrey was traded to the 49ers. The Niners sent a second, third, and fourth round pick in 23 and a fifth round pick in 24 to Carolina. To San Francisco from Carolina. Now, the 49ers obviously clearly feel that they are in win now championship mode. And we saw what the Los Angeles Rams did and the way they kind of pushed all their chips to the center table, said, draft picks be damned. I'm going to go get a Super Bowl. And they did it. Niners seem to be doing the same thing. You now have an offense that has Christian McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, Brandon Ayuk. And a stable of running backs and one of the smartest, most creative coaches in the league. I picked the 49ers to be in the Super Bowl before the season started, so this kind of makes my prediction feel a little bit better. But for the Falcons specifically, they get McCaffrey out of the division, and they still have 2 games against the Panthers. That's a plus. And you have a team that's pretty much in full-on rebuild mode going forward. There are 2 things that I will highlight about this trade that I think are critically important for the Falcons and Falcons fans to understand, and it's this. And we even did this yesterday when we played Crazy GM, right? Talked about getting Roquan Smith here. Stop hoarding draft picks like they are the end-all, be-all to your future. They are if you want your rebuild to take 3 or 4 years before you get out of it. They won't be, or your rebuild won't be that long if you make moves for legitimate players. It's the way of the gun in the NFL now, folks. You can't escape it. You can do this slow rebuild thing, knock yourself out. You can be the Detroit Lions. Go for it. Keep stockpiling draft picks. Keep drafting second and third at the top of the draft every year. You're going to get good players. And over the course of 3 or 4 years, you'll get enough good players that you'll have a roster that's competitive. If you don't want to wait that long, go trade for viable pieces now. I am a 100%, and I love it when GMs go all in. I will never fault the GM for going all in. I don't think that there's anything wrong with what the Niners have done. And if it doesn't work for them, oh well, you swung, you took a shot, you might have missed, but guess what? You took a shot. I'd rather my GM be that aggressive and give away the draft picks and figure it out down the road, because at the end of the day, guess what? You know what the Niners don't know? What those second, third, and fourth picks are going to be, as far as what number they're going to be, who's going to be available. It doesn't mean that it is impossible for you to continue to get better. It just means you have to do it differently. That's all it means. And oh, by the way, this ended up being a very friendly cap deal for the Niners, as he's a 1-year rental on a cheap contract for San Francisco at $1.03 million against the cap this year. Now, he's owed $11.8 million next year, but because the Niners don't inherit the bonus proration of the salary, they don't have to worry about that. So it lessens the cap hit of $19 million to a much more amenable number. So yes, of course, it is very big for a running back, but still, I am not surprised by this deal, but still, I am very much a proponent of teams going all in. I like to watch it, and I hope that the Falcons are willing to do the same thing. I hope that they're willing to go beyond just signing players in free agency, because again, guess what? There's a lot of factors in free agency you can't control. There's only one factor in a trade, whether you can get a team to say yes. That's it. Only one factor in a trade. In free agency, a player gets to choose what they want. There are factors of who they're playing with and everything else. The player has no say in a trade. It's the GM who has the say. So I think that part is very critically important to understand and know. And if the Falcons are going to get better quick, they're going to have to make some legitimate trades. I know everybody's waiting it out and saying, look, we're playing with house money. We're playing with house money. Here's the thing. And remember this, and take a lesson from the Atlanta Hawks, because I've told you this before. Do not let what you're seeing now affect where you think you're going to be in a year, because everything is going to change and other teams are going to get better. I say it again repeatedly. The worst thing that happened to the Hawks was them to beat the 76ers 2 years ago in the playoffs. Beating the Knicks was fine. Winning a first-round series was fine. Getting to the Eastern Conference Finals set this team ahead mentally of where they thought they would be. And everybody expected them to take another step, and they can't do it. Just because they are 9-7 this year, or 9-8, or 10-7, and make the playoffs doesn't guarantee anything. Look at what we're seeing in the NFL with the Packers, with the Rams, with the Buccaneers. Right? You're getting turnover in the playoffs every year. And as of right now, there's no data to prove that the Falcons are a consistent perennial playoff team like the Steelers, like the Ravens, like the Patriots were when Brady was there. Like, you can't just pencil them in the playoffs. Can't do it. So, got to be very, very cautious of what we're seeing and not letting it affect how you want to build a championship team in the future. I'd love for the Falcons to go make a move at the deadline. I'd love it. I'm not against it at all. They go get a guy like Roquan Smith, give up a second and a third or whatever it is for Roquan Smith, go for it. Go for it. Got to be able to resign him, but go for it. I mean, like I said yesterday, you'll be able to tag him, keep him at least for 2 years. So you're giving up two draft picks for 2 years, I think, or a year and a half, I should say. That's fine by me. I hope Fontenot is that aggressive down the road. We'll 100% have to see if he really is. You can get more great information on the Falcons at Locked On Falcons. I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Falcons one of your first listens every single day. Make sure you check out NFL key predictions every Friday at Locked On NFL. Locked On's local experts give you the inside scoop on the 5 biggest games in the NFL weekend, including Sunday Night Football and Monday Night Football. Which, oh, by the way, aren't the Bears in primetime again? It's like crazy. Anyway, betting advice from the field's leading experts at Bet Online. You know where we go for that. As well, follow NFL Key Predictions every Friday on Locked On NFL. It's available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. All right, before we get to our picks for this week's games, let's hand out the Shovel of Wisdom.
Brace yourselves, because it's time for the Shovel of Wisdom.
You know how we do it. Every day we have to set somebody straight for saying or doing something stupid. You can hit them upside the head with a shovel at my Twitter account, at Mark Zinno, MarkZinno. Of course, use the hashtag Shovel of Wisdom. And today my shovel goes to Rob Murphy. You guys are going, who's Rob Murphy? Yeah, well, I agree with you. Who's Rob Murphy? Well, Detroit Pistons assistant general manager Rob Murphy is now on leave after the organization commenced an investigation into an allegation of workplace misconduct involving a female former employee. God. How come nobody in America is able to have an appropriate relationship with anybody at work? Maybe because you shouldn't dip your pen in the company ink. Maybe because you shouldn't crap where you eat. Maybe because you shouldn't do that kind of stuff. But regardless, like, I don't understand. Like, I don't understand how you guys cannot have how you can't date somebody at work and not have it turn weird. What the hell's going on around here? It's kind of crazy. Like, it doesn't seem to make any sense anymore to me. Like, I can't figure out what the hell is wrong with people and why every work relationship in America, at least in pro sports, has to turn inappropriate. Makes absolutely no sense to me. None. I'm perplexed by it. I'm verklempt. Ridiculous stuff. All right, let's get to some games this weekend, particularly on the college side, that I think are very, very interesting. A lot of big games, and I want to stay in the SEC here because that's our home conference, despite the fact that Georgia is not playing this weekend. And oh, by the way, guys, oh God, I mean, can we do this real quick? Shovel of Wisdom to Georgia Tech. Stinker last night. I tried to tell people, like, from a gambling standpoint, I'm like, betting against Georgia Tech as a favorite was the easiest thing in the world. There's legitimately no reason they should be favored over anybody. Period. I understand how bad Virginia is, and their offense is terrible. There's no reason Georgia Tech should be favored over everybody. pump the brakes. Anyway, back to the SEC. Georgia not playing this weekend, obviously. Now, Alabama is going to host Mississippi State. I can think of about 100 things I would have rather have gone through than have been through a week of practice at Alabama this week after they lost to Tennessee and had 17 penalties. So needless to say, it might have been a rough week for those kids at practice. Now, let me give you some stats here that are interesting. Alabama has 3 regular season losses since 2019. The following game, after those losses, they won by at least 19 points. They averaged over 40 points per game and only gave up 10.5 points per game. After 2 of those losses, of those 3 losses I talked about in 2019, they happened to play Mississippi State, which they won by an average of 35 points. In fact, the last 3 years, the Tide have beaten the Bulldogs by a combined 128-16. Mike Leach, the head coach of the Mississippi State Bulldogs, Will Rogers, the current quarterback, have never beaten Nick Saban in Alabama. In fact, Will Rogers, who may end up leading the SEC in every major passing category when he finally graduates and leaves Mississippi State, has never thrown a touchdown pass against Alabama. In fact, there hasn't been a Mississippi State touchdown pass in Alabama in 4 years. It's unreal. So, begrudgingly, I'm going to lay 21 points with Alabama. I mean, the problem is their defense. Obviously, it's not their offense. Alabama's going to score. Just a question of whether they can stop anybody at this point in time. Very interesting game down in the Bayou between Ole Miss and LSU. This is going to be a fun one. Here's something crazy about Ole Miss. Ready for this? Top 15 in the nation in yards per game, yards per play, and points. They're 129th in the country in time of possession. There's 131 teams. They are third to last in time of possession. What does that mean? They score fast and they score often. That is really weird. They're also third in the nation, by the way, in third down conversion percentage at 58%. So, and the offensive line has only allowed 2 sacks all season. Now, the problem with Ole Miss is defensively this year, they've had some serious lapses. You know, like they've just not played well for stretches of games, and they've allowed the opponents back in games or to take leads. Vanderbilt led 20-10 at halftime. And then last week, it was a 21-0 lead over Auburn that quickly turned into a 28-24 game, Ole Miss only leading by 4. Also, Ole Miss hasn't played anybody yet, so I think that's a little bit disconcerting. You know, and in reality, Ole Miss might not or shouldn't be undefeated basically because Will Levis, in the game against Kentucky, Will Levis had 2 fumbles in like the final 3 minutes that would have at least give the Wildcats a shot at a tie because they were in field goal range. So LSU's offense centers around Jaden Daniels, their quarterback. Here's the thing. He's been sacked more than any other quarterback in the SEC at 21 times. Mississippi is second in the SEC with 19 sacks on the season. LSU's really struggled with their 2 other biggest opponents this year. Florida State in the opener and Tennessee, where they got blown out at home. I know it's a classic spot of an unranked team being favored over a ranked team, and it's really hard to ignore that. But Kiffin's the better coach. They have the better running game. I'm probably going to be wrong on this one, but something is telling me to stay with Ole Miss here, that maybe LSU isn't all that dangerous. And again, maybe I'm stuck on the Tennessee win over them because I think Ole Miss's offense can score as quick as Tennessee's can. So there's that. Couple more games that I think are really, really interesting in the college slate. You have Pac-12 battle between Oregon and UCLA. You know, Bo Nix has been fantastic all year long. In fact, this year at home, 14 total touchdowns, 0 interceptions. Make of that what you will. And since the beatdown at the hands of Georgia in week 1, Oregon's been pretty much unstoppable. I mean, that to me says everything. Here's the big thing. This game comes down to one particular stat. You ready for this? One particular stat. UCLA converts over 56% of their third down conversions. Oregon is bottom 20 in the country in third down conversion percentage on defense. So they allow a lot of third downs. If they can get that number in a better spot, then Oregon has a real good chance to win this game and cover it. Ducks are 6-1-1 in their last 8 as a favorite. Good enough for me to back them here and lay the 6 points. Finally, Clemson and Syracuse. Real short answer is this. This is going to be a fun game, too. 2 undefeated teams in the ACC. Syracuse is getting 13.5, and I'm going to take them. I think Clemson's offense is great. I think their defense is even better. I still just think this is too many points. Clemson's been great at covering shorter numbers against opponents. 6.5 against NC State, 3.5 against Florida State, covering these shorter numbers. And they've covered big numbers against bad opponents. But when they were over a touchdown against Wake Forest, they didn't cover. It's too many points here. Unless you get this typical 34-10 kind of blowout, which is possible, I don't think that they can that they can not stay within the number. I don't know why I stumbled like that. I just couldn't remember what my train of thought was. Anyway, so unless you get a 34-10 blowout, I think this is a scenario where Syracuse can keep this thing within 2 touchdowns. Obviously, we get the Falcons and Bengals on Sunday. Falcons are 6-0 against the spread. Here's an interesting stat. In the last 33 years, there have only been 7 other teams that started 6-0 against the spread. Of those 7, only 4 of them won their next game, and only 3 of them covered. So, odds are Falcons will not be 6-1 against the spread. That's the odds. Doesn't mean that if they win the game, they'll cover the spread. I'll tell you that much. But doesn't mean that Cincinnati can't cover the spread and still win the game. So there's that. I know that it's a big number and why it's a big number. And usually when you see a line like this going, okay, this is a 6-0 team, with the exception of last week when they won by 2 touchdowns. Every other game has been a 1-score game. This is a big number. Why would I back Cincinnati? Probably shouldn't. Take the points. But it's on the road, and I think that's a big thing. I generally think that's a big thing. That is the Falcons going into Cincinnati may be a little bit of a different nut to crack, if you will. But still, I'll take the Falcons and the points. I don't know if they win the game. I'll take the Falcons and the points because why not? All right, that'll do it for us here on a Football Friday. Again, appreciate you guys making A to Z your first listen. Check out all the shows on the Locked On Sports Network. A to Z, hitting hard, ATL Day Ones, Locked On Falcons, Locked On Hawks, and our Braves postcast, Grant McCauley. An amazing season here at Locked On ATL, brother. Appreciate all the love and support. So go forth, do good things on this Friday. Don't forget that we are on Roku TV. Wherever you get your Roku TV on your Amazon Fire Stick, download Roku TV. Check out all the shows on the A to Z. Check out A to Z, but all the rest of the shows on Locked On Sports Atlanta. And don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Give a thumbs up and a like to all the content there. Want to wish you guys a wonderful Friday. Have a great weekend. Back on Monday to recap it all. Thanks for listening and watching A to Z right here on Locked On Sports Atlanta. Don't take any crap from anybody. See ya.